growing up in like a relatively small town and then going to a relatively small foundation university, everybody who I met was just like, "Whoa, your art's really cool. Oh, it's so cool that you can do that." And so when I met these people, I was like, "God damn it, I'm fucking great. I'm a brilliant artist. They're gonna look at my portfolio and they're gonna be like, you need to join the studio straight away." And you know, of course, they looked at my portfolio, and I remember one of the guys from ILM, he looked through it and he looked up at me and he went, "So, why are you talking to us?"
Is that what he said, or was that what the eye said?
Yeah. No, that's what he said. And he was like, "Do you want to? Who do you want to work with?" And I was like, "I really want to work with ILM, and you know, it's my dream job." And he went, I think you'd be better suited for animation." And I was like, "Oh."
Please welcome concept artist Daniel McGarry, who drops by today to tell us how he broke into the industry and secure his first ever job at none other than ILM. Now beginning a new journey at Framestore, Daniel is someone who's incredibly passionate and relentless in his own creative pursuit, and also in helping others in their own. So in this episode, we pick all of this apart by discussing the highs and lows of pursuing a career, living outside of your comfort zone, the realities of life as a professional concept artist, and why it's something to be excited about. Daniel also is one of the co-founders of Concept 101, which returns again this year, and we learn about how important it is to nurture community, learning from peers and mentor students, and so much more. Plenty to chew on in this episode, so let's go. Let's do this. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Let's Read podcast. I'm delighted to welcome on today's guest, Daniel McGarry. Welcome, Dan.
Yo.
How's it going?
Yeah, very well, thanks. It's been, about a year since I've been on the podcast? I'm like a returning guest now.
That's true. Very exclusive club. I think there's like literally a handful of people that have returned. So welcome back. But obviously this is a nice solo one. So how's it been over the last 12 months since we spoke? And I'm sure there'll be a link somewhere which will highlight people to check out that episode as well.
Yeah. The last year. I don't think too much has changed. I mean, the last time we spoke, well, I was at ILM the last time we spoke, and now I've moved to Framestore as of like very recently. So that's been quite exciting to kind of go through those changes. So it was like a really awesome 2 years at ILM, and definitely like the best first job anybody could ever ask for, with just a crazy, amazing team of people. So yeah, I really treasure that experience, but it's kind of, I'm excited to go see a new chapter, or whatever people say. I've been doing the Concept 101 podcast, which has been pretty fun, and also doing Concept 101, the event that's still going, and we're gearing up, like while we're chatting now, for the second event, the 2023 event, which we've got like 17 super amazing speakers coming and loads of awesome studios doing portfolio reviews, and the venue's expanded twice over, so we've got like 100 people coming this year, over 400 last year. Wow. So that's pretty awesome. And yeah, just, I don't know, living life, I guess. Trying my best to stay relaxed whilst being busy. So
you sound like quite a lazy dude and have not much going on. So we can definitely have a chat about getting you more busier. But yeah, man, how are you handling all of these fires that you got going on, or plates that you're spinning, whichever the nice cool phrase is relevant? You look calm, you look relaxed, but I'm sure it's not an easy thing to handle.
That's because we're on a podcast. I gotta pretend
fair enough, fair enough.
Sane.
It's a filter, right?
No, I don't know. Yeah. Well, I've got it is quite a lot. Like I do stuff with the event with Jules and Stefan. Got my 8-hour work day. You know, I do personal projects, do mentoring, and all this stuff. I think it's often just like I think I might just be a little bit psychotic, and I just like doing stuff all the time. I'm always trying to find myself like something to keep me busy. But at the same time, you know, it's not like I don't relax. Like most weekends I don't do any work. And I just chill out. So I think it's just, for me, I always just try and get everything that I need to get done during the week.
Yeah.
And then during the weekend, I can just chill out and get back to it the next week. So yeah, I don't know. I'm busy, but I'm not I'm not literally spending every second of my day.
Oh,
doing
that's
something.
good and that's
So,
healthy.
yeah.
It's good that you carve out like I guess the weekend as well. Is that just like a habit of yours, or do you have to like kind of really work on making sure you get your stuff done in the 5 days before the weekend kicks in?
I mean, I definitely think it takes a certain amount of discipline, but I, I guess like going back to kind of like where I grew up in Oxford, and where I went to school was a very kind of strict place.
Okay.
So from like a fairly young age, I had to retain like some level of
Mm-hmm.
discipline, because otherwise like they used to just like heap homework on us, and then when I got to
Okay.
university it was the same thing. And so I think it's just like a habit at this point where, you know, if I have something to do, I'll just try and get it done rather than delaying it. I think that's always the best way to do it,
Yeah,
is, you know,
yeah.
just cut stuff out straight away. But yeah, I don't know, it's not too bad. Some days it's bad, you know, you get like a project you really don't want to do. You bury your head in your hands at
Yeah,
your desk
man.
and cry a little bit, and then you get on with it.
Yeah, I think those tears are necessary. I think it's impossible to do without the tears. Although I'm sure there are some more bigger psychopaths out there that have never cried and just plow through it all. But like, I guess we'll probably jump around a fair bit anyway. But like when you are tackling, say, a high workload or you got stuff happening, do you take it like as a whatever's in your way first, you just demolish that and then go to the next thing, or are you quite strategic in terms of how you know maneuver around these tasks that you have to do?
I don't know, it depends on the thing, right? If I try to do things by priority. Everything's got a deadline, whether even personal work really has a deadline. So I try to maneuver myself in such a way that, you know, things get done in the correct order, not necessarily just the order that they come. Which I think is, you know, if you're working in the industry as well, that's something that will just happen to you. You know, like there's been plenty of projects that I've worked on just as a concept artist where you start one shot with one brief, and then 2 hours later they're calling you. They're going, "All right, stop that. It's time for a new concept. We're doing something else. You're gonna finish that next week." So you know, you have to stay fairly flexible, I think, even in just the general work environment. So I just try to, yeah, pull that into other stuff that I do. But yeah.
Ah, sick. And so, how long have you been? Mentioned a couple of years at ILM. You just started Frame Store. Congratulations again, by the way.
Thank
But
you.
how long has this professional concept art journey started? And I guess there's probably two parts: the trying to get into the industry, then getting into the industry, or is it all like one big smudge for you?
So I think I can probably break it down to, like, if we were talking about getting into the industry. You know, I really liked concept art ever since I was, I don't know, like maybe like 17. I was quite into it. And, you know, I'd watch like things who design cinema, and I'd watch Amador Duri's videos and stuff like that. And I was quite intent on, like, you know, becoming a concept artist. But it wasn't really until I was maybe like 20 that I actually realized what the job was. So, I mean, you can scroll down through my Instagram and see years worth of stuff. And it's all beautiful. But yeah, when I was about 20, I went to an event called Vertex, and I met the ILM team that I worked with now, and they looked through my portfolio and gave me honest advice. And it was the first honest advice and feedback I think I'd ever had, really, because growing up in like a relatively small town and then going to a relatively small foundation university, everybody who I met was just like, "Whoa, your art's really cool. Oh, it's so cool that you can do that." And so when I met these people, I was like, "God damn it, I'm fucking great. I'm a brilliant artist. They're gonna look at my portfolio and they're gonna be like, you need to join the studio straight away." And, you know, of course, they looked at my portfolio, and I remember one of the guys from ILM, he looked through it and he looked up at me and he went, "So, why are you talking to us?"
Is that what he said, or was that what the eye said?
Yeah. No, that's what he said. And he was like, "Do you want to? Who do you want to work with?"
You want
And I
me
was
to
like,
sign this
I
for
really
you,
want to
or?
work with. Yeah. I was like, "I really want to work with ILM, and, you know, it's my dream job." And he went, I think you'd be better suited for animation." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And, you know, and then I went and watched their lecture, and I saw what the job actually entailed, and I met other artists, and it was like my first introduction into what concept art actually was. Because, like, I think at that stage I was just doing a bit of everything. I was doing like attempts at riot splash art, book illustrations, random vehicle designs, character designs, but like nothing within the actual like threading of the industry.
Yeah.
So yeah, when I met those people at around like 20, it really actually, I kind of consider that like the start of my concept art journey properly.
Yes.
I was learning like related stuff before then, but it wasn't directional. It wasn't moving towards somewhere. So after that, I started going to more events. Like I went to industry workshops when that was still around. I went to Vertex again. And I just started like talking to more people who were also kind of like around my skill level, and most of them are still my friends now, which is awesome. Coming up with people is great, and I just started building towards it. And so over 2 years roughly, I went from like very, very amateur to being able to work at ILM, which was it was. I feel incredibly lucky to have been able to work there so quickly. And yeah, it was pretty interesting, but I think it was just that I had really great people around me, and I had really great mentors and people who gave me their time and their patience to actually explain stuff. And obviously I also did some work that helped, push that forward as well. But yeah, once I joined, just before I joined the industry, I did some freelance for about a year. So I worked on, I think it's still technically NDA, but I worked on some Taylor Swift music videos. I worked on some Spotify adverts and stuff like that. I remember the coolest bit I think was I did like a sci-fi room design for like Travis Scott. Sick. On a Spotify thing, and I was like, this is cool. Yeah. And then I started working professionally at ILM, and unlike the last time we spoke, I think I can actually say like some of the things I've worked on, which is great. So I did like Doctor Strange, Fast and Furious, the Pale Blue Eye, Willow. I did a tiny bit of stuff on Andor. I did one whole droid. I didn't do a whole droid design. I did a bit of a droid design on that. That was a collaboration between me and like 3 other people. And yeah, I think, I don't know, like 4 or 5 credits on. Sandman, that was great as well. And then I've got stuff coming out like. I'm super, super excited to see The Creator.
Yeah, man.
I got to work with James Klein on that for about 6-7 months, which was like an insane experience. That guy is,
That must have felt like learning on steroids.
Yeah, it was really. Yeah. He's such an incredibly like collaborative and nice person. So it was pretty awesome. I think when they announced that I was getting to work with him, they were like, oh, so you'll be working with James on this? And I was like, oh, James who? And they were like, James Klein. And I was like, I was like trying to hold in the excitement. But yeah, I mean, like I said, it's been such a cool 2 years, and I got to work on so many cool projects, and there's still a lot of stuff that I've worked on that will, be coming out in the future. I just hope I get to show some of it. That's the curse of concept art, is you work on loads of stuff and then it never moves into the real world. But yeah, at least I'll get a credit, hopefully.
For sure. I mean, just a little quick, I guess, tangent on that one. How do you feel about not having your work shown? Obviously, the project does come out. People can see whatever the end result is. I know sometimes things branch off differently in how they were when they first obviously concepted, hence the name of concept. That's what it's supposed to be. But like, do you... does that bother you, like when you can't get to show stuff, or is it like, cool, I got the experience of actually being there, crafting this thing, and then you're on to the next thing? Like, because there's like, I guess, different schools of thought where it's a case of, I'm happy to show personal stuff, I don't really care about showing my personal stuff, maybe because there's a mismatch or it's just a strategy thing, and then someone like, they have nothing to show because they're just so engrossed in client stuff. Like, what's your point of view on that?
Well, I've been working for 2 years and I only have one piece of work in the public eye, which is like a few VFX concepts I did for Willow. So on that note, like, yeah, I mean, it can be difficult. I think the reality is that probably a lot of people in the industry maybe aren't that bothered by it, because a lot of work that you do in the concept art industry isn't that showable. A lot of the time you've got a day to do something and you just put it together to the best of your ability, and that's what goes out there. So, there's a lot of stuff that I'm not too bothered about showing because I don't think it's interesting to other people. I don't think it's the kind of stuff I might want to be hired for. For example, like a lot of the work that I've done professionally has been kind of like VFXy kind of realistic photo bashing concepts and stuff where it has to look bang on and match a plate. And, you know, if you look at my portfolio, it's all painterly kind of like 3D sci-fi stuff. So yeah, when you're saying like there's a mismatch, there is definitely a mismatch in some of my professional work versus like theoretically what I'd like to be doing. Then again, there's definitely some projects where I'm like totally, you know, fingers crossed that I get to show some of the work, because from time to time you get to work on some projects which are just amazing, and you have people that push you to produce some really amazing stuff. And I think one of the things is like, you know, we all like to think that we push ourselves a lot maybe when we make personal work, but when you get to work with somebody who you have to listen to, you know, where you can't just be like, I don't think I'm going to do that because this is my project. It can really push you to improve a lot, because sometimes you'll get a request from somebody and they're like, you know, I really think you need to change this. And you're like, do I? Or is that even possible? And they're like, just do it. And you spend like a week working on it. And by the end of it, you're like, wow, not only was that possible, but it looks way cooler. And, you know, I learned so much from just that experience of doing stuff. And yeah, so I definitely have stuff I hope to show. But, you know, I'd like to think I have a fairly up-to-date and extensive personal portfolio as well, and I'm fairly happy with all that stuff, and I've got new stuff to post from this year, so we'll see. Yeah. I have been a bit busy though, and I haven't made as many projects as I usually would. So I am missing out a little bit on. I have a lot of ideas that I want to do when I have free time. So
like, and there is that kind of. I don't know how it is for you, but I guess sometimes it's a case of when you're doing personal stuff, you're like, oh, I need to get back on more professional stuff. I want to work on, you know, I want to be better, like, you know, the grass is greener. You always realize it's not, but you still convince yourself that it is. And obviously when you're on professional stuff, you're like, oh, but that project that I did is way cool. I want to get back on that. And I guess it's kind of like, you just need to find that balance and know how to like psych yourself up for each one.
Totally.
Is that something that you've had to manage, or is it easy for you to kind of switch gears depending on whatever you're tackling? Obviously not just even the concept art stuff, all the other things you got going on.
I try to, you know, sometimes there are days where I have to, you know, wake up in the morning and I'm like, okay, you can do this, you can get through the day. But I think most of the time, I think one thing that some people might, or one of the reasons that some people might struggle with, for example, like having, you know, very strong emotions attached to like work that they're doing at work or personal work or whatever, and, you know, feeling bad about it essentially because it's not going the way they want, is I feel like some people attach a little bit too much of themselves to the work that they do. I definitely attach some of my feelings to my personal work that I make, but I try to maintain this kind of like separation between myself and my professional work, because professional work, the way that I personally see it, is like I would love to give people my opinions, and I would love to tell directors like what I think about things that we're working on. But that's at the behest of the director, right? If they want my opinion, then they'll ask for it. And if they're cool with collaboration, then they'll be cool with it. But ultimately, I'm there to facilitate their project, right? I'm just like a little cog in the machine, essentially. I might be creating work that has like large ripple effects throughout the production. So, you know, like one concept I do could result in like hundreds of thousands of man hours of like production right before it gets to the final thing. But it's still just a facilitation of somebody else's idea. So I try not to get too bummed out when somebody tells me to change something or whatever, because, you know, if I want to do something, I'll just go do it in my personal work. Not to say that it doesn't happen, but I just try to.
Sure. You mentioned a few moments ago, about the type of work you want to do. Obviously, you worked at ILM. You already mentioned like a nice portfolio of projects you've worked on, which are very different visually. And obviously you mentioned your personal work's different as well. So what is it that you want to work on? Like the kind of work that you would like to do? Or maybe that's probably a worse way to phrase it, is a case of like, what are the things that really stoke your imagination or really get you excited about creating something? Subject matter, or even something else entirely?
I think I mean, in terms of like short term, what I would like to do more of is just pre-production. I mean, pre-production on movies is especially like blue sky stuff is so fun because you get to just like throw ideas out there. And I think even part of it is like when you're given a script and you get to read through the script and the director says like, okay, here's the 6 key moments and here's the cutouts from the script, give me something, and you get to just give them something. That can be a really kind of rewarding experience because that's truly the most collaborative that you can often get with a director in the film industry. So yeah, I guess just like general pre-production stuff. I mean, in terms of like my taste in genres and stuff, I love sci-fi the most, I think. And I'd love to be doing more design work overall and, just making more stuff that I guess like people hold in the film, like props and sets and... I got to go onto set one day to see a set that I designed, and that was like an insanely cool experience, like seeing the actors running around on it and seeing them filming on it, and yeah, that was super, super awesome. So I guess just more of that. I'd love to also start going on set more. But the thing is, I'm not really aware of like I guess like the appropriate trajectories for someone's career in a way.
Right.
I feel like I had at least in terms of like what people told me before I joined ILM, like an idea of like, oh, it'll take me like 5 years to get into ILM and then we'll see where it goes. And so all of those kind of trajectories that other people gave me kind of disappeared once I got the job, which was kind of a shock because everyone was like, yeah, you won't get it. So it's definitely been interesting because I've been trying to spend the last 2 years like looking at everything that I've got to experience and figure out what I actually do want to do. And honestly, I don't know 100%. There's so much cool stuff in the film industry. And even on that, you see so many people doing cool stuff in the games industry and in like physical design stuff, and there's just so much out there.
Man.
And I want to try a little bit of it.
And like just to touch upon that, like there's definitely, you're right, there's so many avenues where you can really express and apply your skills, and even then that's just stuff that's still, I guess, like common. There's other things that have yet to be discovered yet in terms of like where these skills can be applied, in my opinion, and that's still exciting to kind of see where that's going as well. And yeah, it's a cool thing you mentioned there about like being on set. Did you find that you were kind of like still designing the thing that was already built for you after seeing it? Or is it like a different kind of experience you get when you see it? Like, does it still fuel your creative process? Oh, this time I'll do this next time? Or like, nah, that was pretty cool. I like how it looks. And you're just admiring your beauty that you've made.
So in that specific scenario, I was only there for like a day.
Okay.
So I was literally there just being like, it's so beautiful. I mean, it was just fun because you get to walk around, you can like gawk at the actors from across the set. I got some really angry looks from them. That was great.
Okay.
But and you chat to people and meet there's so many other people who are involved in the process, and I think that really helped me realize that or just really working professionally for the last 2 years. As concept artists, especially when you join the industry, you have a very isolated view of yourself. I'm a concept artist, I'm designing this. Once I've finished the final stroke on that painting, it's done. But it's really interesting, I think, to see how other disciplines take that work and just roll with it. If you look at VFX pipeline, you have hundreds of people who are be involved in modeling it, texturing it, doing reworks of it, redesigning certain sections, figuring out which areas need to be rotoed out and how that works. And the more that you understand that stuff, the kind of more depth that you can add, I think, into your concepts on like a production scale. So like if you're designing a set, well, will this section actually work well for filming? Does this give them the space to like film on and stuff like that? So yeah, I don't know. It's it is really cool to, I think, beyond like, I wasn't really thinking about, oh, there's my set. I was thinking about that, but I was also just mainly thinking I was getting to meet people like I never realized before I went on set that there are on-set art directors who are there to actually art direct set builds, and you have like on-set graphic designers who build like whole sticker templates that they then put on all of the sets to like set decorate and stuff like that. So it was just a really eye-opening experience more than anything else. And getting through Pinewood security, that was eye-opening as well, because that place is like a prison.
Did you get through or did you sneak in? That sounds like a story.
I got through eventually.
Okay.
I got through eventually.
Was it worse than boarding a flight?
Oh my god, way worse. Yeah.
Now that's like, behind the scenes stuff like that just fascinates me, and inspires me, like as it clearly does to yourself as well. That just seeing, and you mentioned before, like being a cog in the machine. You see the machine whilst still being a cog, although you might have a day off that day, being the cog. But now, like, and I think it's also important as well, like to, even if you're unable to go on set, or like like especially like in if you're working remotely or whatever, like sometimes it's even not a chance at all. But there's like so many things you can do to kind of figure out, or just even look a bit beyond your role. And it kind of like goes back to what you mentioned before about where you grew up and how you were studying. Then you felt like you were in this kind of like bubble, and you're the center of the bubble. And then the kind of bubble expanded and the center was shifted a little bit. And it seems like that was the same thing when you went to on set, and obviously expanding your career going beyond as well. Like it's always constantly shifting. You mentioned ILM there. Like ILM again, like for someone like me, I think ILM and its history and what it's done for the industry is probably the reason why we have an industry, in my opinion. So it's kind of like it's a huge name, and like you mentioned, that's your first major job, being in ILM. So that's like, congratulations on that achievement first and foremost. That's probably like
all downhill from here. Probably, so.
You never know. But like if it is, it's going to be a nice ride down because it's quite a high hill. But and obviously like I totally get the sentiments that people had where you said that, oh yeah, it's going to take 5 years. Some of us have been waiting even longer for that kind of stuff as well. But that doesn't mean to say that you just strolled it. I mean, maybe you did. But I'd love to know about that time when you were told that, why are you talking to us? To that moment when they said, hey, you got a job. Like, what were you doing? Or do you even like, have you reflected upon that time? Or was it just gung-ho, going straight for it?
I think because I do quite a lot of mentoring, like the thing is I spent a lot of time reflecting on that time while I was doing it, and it really kind of seared itself into my brain, like a lot of those emotions that you deal with when you're a student and you're trying to get into the industry, and also a lot of the difficulties that you have. In terms of like, moving forward and like what I was trying to do when I was doing it, like there's something that one of my like teachers said to me growing up, which always stuck with me, it was something along the lines of like, there were a bunch of students in our class complaining that they had studied for the test, but the questions that they had studied for weren't on the test. They had studied, like, they tried to strategically study half of the textbook or something. Yeah. And our teacher said to them, he said, it's really funny, isn't it, how when you learn half the textbook, you get less of the answers, and when you learn the whole textbook you get more lucky, right? Isn't that crazy? And I guess it's just that thing of like, essentially what he's saying is like, you make your own luck, right? And that's always really stuck with me. But I think also, as like you said, as my bubble has expanded, I've also realized that it's only a half truth. Like, you make your own luck, but you also do get lucky. Like I think it's very important to be considerate of the nice things that you've had in your life, especially like I've been very lucky. My parents have been incredibly supportive of me pursuing art from a very young age, because they're both architects, and I got to grow up around art and stuff like that. They brought me to exhibitions. I was doing life drawing from a really young age, so I had a lot of really wonderful, like, lucky things that seriously influenced my life. So I don't want to say like, oh, it was all me, it was all my hard work, because nobody's self-made, like I got pulled up by not only my friends, but like I said before, like mentors, like people like Kevin Fleeman, Rhys Griffiths, Thomas Chamberlain Keane. They all gave me like invaluable advice, and just like the kindness that some people show you is crazy. Even I remember like specifically one time I was really struggling with photo bashing, and there's this really good artist called Mitch Asseltine who works in the States, and I hit him up because he had this amazing portfolio of like just super crisp photo bash work, and I was like, how do you do this? And he was like, oh, just hop on a call with me and I'll explain it. And he did like a full hour with me, and it's like, without the kind of generosity and kindness of people like that, I really don't know where I would be. If it was just purely in terms of like stuff that I did, I just think I did a lot of work. I just made a lot of stuff, and I tried my best to incorporate the stuff that people who showed me that generosity gave me. So if somebody said, make the sky pink, made the effort to at least try it.
Yeah.
Even if I was looking at them and I was like, what the fuck, the sky's blue. Sometimes you would look at it and you go, okay, that's really not my thing. I don't like that. Sometimes you would go, wow, there's a reason that they're a professional and I'm not. Which was about 90% of the time. I think also I did a lot of CGMA courses. I watched a lot of Gumroads and stuff. I made loads and loads and loads of projects. I think I don't know, when did I start working? 2022, so no 2021. I don't know, when I like first spoke to the guys at ILM, I had this like very mediocre portfolio, and then I completely reworked my portfolio in 6 months. So I did I think like essentially one project per month. So I had 6 improved projects to show the next time I went to an event. Then after that event, I completely reworked my whole portfolio again. So the next time I spoke to the team from ILM, I'd actually completely redone my portfolio twice in that time space. So I think that was the kind of thing where, a lot of the time I see students who ask me for advice and they say like, oh, how can I improve in this and that? And I'll give them advice and we'll go back and forth on stuff. And within a year, they've only changed like 2 images in the portfolio and the majority of their old portfolio is still there. So I think just being proactive about, I guess, replacing everything in a way, like just understanding that when you're at kind of like a lower end of the industry, right, when you're trying to get into it, it's important to realize that pretty much everything you do is extremely disposable, and that you probably won't want to be showing it. I mean, I've kept all of my stuff on my Instagram from like the last 7 years purely because I think it's useful for people to look at. If you want to go see what 2 years of development looks like before I join ILM, just scroll down my Instagram and you'll see it's bad. It's messy, it's disgusting, but it's necessary,
But at the time, did you think that it was bad, or did you think, this is the shit?
It's funny because I was talking with Jules and Stefan, the co-organizers of Concept 101, about this recently, and we were talking about the fact that when you're learning, and just I guess like throughout your life, you kind of have like these peaks and valleys of like, somebody gives you advice and you're like, oh god, I suck.
Yes.
And then you start improving and you learn a few of the things you said and you get some positive feedback and like you go straight back up here after like 6 months. You're like, I'm the best artist in the world. Woo! And then somebody says, you're not that good. And you go, So I just feel like, it's kind of like peaks and troughs of confidence. I didn't think that everything I was making back then was great, but I do remember some projects that I did, which I'd love to redo now, which I just still really like because I have such positive memories associated with them, where at the time it was a really big struggle, but it was also, like a really big breakthrough for me when I actually finished them and got it done. And, those kind of emotions that you kind of entangle with your work over time really stick with you. Like there's some images I look at and I just get like a little hint of that happiness that I felt back then when I finished it. So that's always really nice.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I was just going to mention that as well. So a beautiful segue. You can tell you do podcasts. It was like you can tell like, yes, skills will improve. Even if you're not trying, like if you do the same thing constantly and consistently, you will naturally improve, maybe at different rates. But obviously, if you be more strategic about it, more targeted, you can make those massive jumps or even just find better ways to do the same thing. But equally, one of the things, and I know like artists, we always complain, and I think rightly so. Like I think complaining is a good thing because it shows that you're not happy and you want to get better. And also we hate ourselves, which I think can get very healthy and unhealthy as well. But I think that's part of being an artist too. Like I'm sure there's a few that just think everything is great and they're the best, and good for them. But most artists I've met, they always have that story of self-pity, self-loathing and self-hate. But there's something that keeps us going, and there's something that makes us want to do stuff. And you can look back at stuff, and that is a sign of progression when you see that you came from a worse place as opposed to getting to a worse place. Although I guess that happens sometimes, like in little maybe skill sets or whatever, but on the whole, you never really get worse at making art. You always improve. But there's something else beyond that, and you mentioned that, like, there's certain things, and the way you just explained it was great. Like, you weave your passion, you weave your soul almost into it, and that's what you really trying to nurture, trying to get out of that piece, as opposed to something that's technically brilliant. I mean, like, what are your thoughts on technique? Like, how important do you think that is? Like, is it something that obviously it's important, but do you think that's the be all and end all of being someone successful?
I think there is a ceiling that you have to reach for sure. I mean, we all know that kind of like vague industry meme of, the guy, we've all met somebody who goes, look, my ideas are the best. You just need to give me a chance to be an art director. I can't make art, but my thoughts are, amazing. And, of course, people like that can't make it in the industry because you do have to be able to demonstrate your ideas practically, right? You have to be able to build them. You have to be able to paint them, model them, whatever it is that's required for that task. And I think there is like that, minimum level of skill that's required. In terms of, I guess you're saying like, how far does the idea take you versus the technical execution, right? I think some people have, amazing ideas. And I think when you talk to them, they go into a level of thought and depth about the things that they're discussing with you that, like, at least for me, I'm very dim, so I'm like, I'm making an alien and he's gonna have a gun, and that's about as far as it goes for me. There's not too much going on in my brain. But some people, they've got like, capitalist critiques in their alien with a gun, and that's cool. But if you, I think there is kind of an inherent link between skill and idea, right? Because the better skilled you are, the better equipped you are to create and demonstrate your idea to an audience of people. If you don't have the let's just use, like, for example, an alien guy with a gun, right? Let's say that you've put a lot of thought into your idea. There's like, you've done like 10 pages of writing about it. If you're at an amateur level and you produce that concept, when people look at that concept, they won't see what's coming through. They won't understand what the idea is because you don't have the kind of like visual acuity to actually make it. Acuity is not a word, I don't think, but whatever.
I think it is. We'll make it a word, don't we? Yeah.
Can you edit it?
Yeah, we'll just add ignore in the red line that comes up as spell check, and we'll keep it.
Yeah, perfect. And there's going to be things missing. For example, like on the gun, if you lack the skills to 3D model, right, your gun might have like a really janky kind of, I don't know, backstop on it, which might make it look totally unnatural. Maybe you don't even know enough about design to make it clearly read as a gun, right? On the other hand, if you're a really good alien and gun designer, then you can clearly, down to the tiniest detail, get your idea across, right? So I think for sure there are people in the industry who have amazing, cool ideas. And I think where you see those people the most is like blue sky stuff, right? Like really, really blue sky stuff. So I think Finian McManus's work on Thor, Love and Thunder is super impressive because you can tell that it's something that he produced quickly, but... or at least I hope he did. I hope I'm not insulting Finian. But, it's something that he produced quickly, but it looks amazing and it gets the idea across super, super well, even though it's like rougher, And I think that is, there's definitely something to be said for that. But I don't think, somebody like Finian McManus could make work like that without being able to make the super polished stuff as well. There's definitely that kind of, I think it's a skill in of itself to make work that's rough. I think the important thing to understand, like if you, maybe somebody who's listening to this is like, but my ideas are the best, like truly they are the best, then okay, but put in the time and the effort to learn the actual, skills that you need to help us understand your idea. Because if you don't, then you're never going to be able to get your ideas across.
No, that perfectly put. And yeah, man, like I think ideas, I love ideas. You mentioned the blue sky phase. That is my favorite part of the creative process. And although I've yet to do it on a movie, on game stuff, like that's where I've had the most fun, and I think I've been the most effective because of all the things you mentioned. But equally, I also think ideas, because ideas can be anything from like just a little single thought that takes a millisecond to come up, or something that you
Yeah.
think and muse on for years. But nevertheless, because you can't hold it, because you can't see it, it is a cheap commodity, almost like rocks and soil. However, if you like you mentioned, like if you spend time, make the effort, and really commit yourself to figuring out, okay, how do I present this idea so it does cut through all the noise, really get to the audience that you want to get it to, whether it's to a client, whether it's to an action audience or whatever. That's where it's at. And like,
I totally.
yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
I just want to jump in and say, like, I totally agree with what you're saying. I think one of the kind of caveats to it all, like, because I think we largely agree, right, is that there's totally the opposite end of the spectrum as well. I mean, there's always been the meme of the guy who has the great ideas, but on the other hand, there's also people who have insane technical execution with nothing creative going on. And that is like totally the other end of the spectrum, and it's just as uninteresting as the other end of the spectrum. Not to like, I totally respect like hyper realistic work, and it's something that I've had to do at work as well. But with access to like advanced 3D modeling software, with access to scan packs, Sketchfab, Quicksource, stuff like that, like highly realistic work, and kind of like highly real world work as well, has become really accessible as like a thing to make. And I think it's a shame that there's kind of been a trend in the industry over the last few years of people who often will make pieces of work purely out of scanned assets. Not because you couldn't make a super interesting piece of work out of that, but I think that they dictate what they make with what they can find, essentially, rather than the other way around, right? I think for a long time, if you listen to things who design school and stuff like that, like it was all about come up with the idea, iterate on that idea, execute it, do it as well as you can. And I think some people have like the opposite problem now, almost, of like, so it's not a problem, but they have the problem now of like defining what they're going to execute by what they can find accessible on the internet, or even what they can buy on the internet, which I think is a kind of the antithesis of concept art in a way, right? It is all about the idea. It is also all about the execution, but you have to have a synthesis of both of those things to create something that's interesting. Which on that note, hopefully people think my work is interesting. That's gonna be really sad if people are being like, well, this guy's full of shit.
Well, I'm sure those people are saying that and also saying this is interesting. That's normally how the internet works. But no, I'm a big fan of your work. I really like it. What kind of, like, when you look at your pieces and when you do your projects, do you have a favorite, or do you not have favorites and it's more so just about this is what came out at the time and this is what you're going to get kind of thing? Like, do you have things that you're more attached to than others?
Yeah, it's funny, but as the years go by, there's different pieces that I find myself liking different years. Like, I think this year I finished this like image of this like big fat pink alien.
Yes.
I think it was this year, and I really like that image. I don't know necessarily why, but I was reading like Meta Baron, which is by or the art is by Jodorowsky, who is this insane illustrator from the 80s, like truly one of the best artists in all time, in my opinion. And I was reading that, I was looking at his art, and I was like, man, I want to create something that kind of like feels like it could be within that universe, but using my existing skills. And so I built this big alien, I designed all this stuff around him, and I just tried to like get that kind of like 80s-ish language across. And when I finished it, it was an easy project. It was a project without any kind of problems along the way, and I felt satisfied with the end result. And I still really like that end result. Not necessarily because every project needs to be seamless for me to like it, but it just accurately represented what I wanted at the time. In the same way, there's like a project I did of like this snow dog with like tentacles coming out of its mouth. I don't know what I called it. I probably called it like Snowball 2 or something. But I usually give my stuff stupid names. But for that project, it was like a massive struggle. I don't post all of my process work, but I think I did, like 20 different versions of that image with like different animal designs. I did a lot of different creature designs. I was doing like a Yeti design for ages. I was doing some other stuff. And then after like a month of working on it and just like changing the idea, changing the landscape, changing the lighting over and over and over again, I thought I saw something, on Pinterest or on the internet, and I just was like, oh, what if I did that? And I tried it out, and again, it was like from there, it was seamless. So I think, whether it's something that I struggled with or something that I found really easy, for me, it's all about like that end emotion that I attach with it. Mm-hmm. Some things you finish them and you never have a good emotion attached to them. Yeah. You're like, this is good for my portfolio. I hate it, but
don't ever talk to me again.
yeah, I never want to see this piece of art again. But yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the great things about working in this industry is that, unlike being a banker or something, you have something to look back on for the rest of your life, really. And it's really interesting how different things that you look at can totally just bring you back to different times of your life, and you remember like certain experiences and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I'm fairly happy with my portfolio at the moment. I think it's fine. Probably get redone one day, but
I mean, like, so what's your thoughts on portfolios in general? I mean, there's like, it's pretty obvious when you look at it, and I say that when I spent like close to a decade just trying to make one and be something that I thought I need to be at least comfortable with sending this out. It took me a decade. So I say that with that disclaimer, but equally it's like it's pretty straightforward what needs to be included, especially if you're like trying to get a job or whatever. But at the same time, like, how long did it take for you to get your portfolio, and what's your opinions on portfolios in general?
I think I think it's like two different stages of most people's career, right? There's the getting into industry and the I'm in the industry. Once you're in the industry, you want to put your best foot forward at all times, right? And you want to produce work that will help keep getting you hired, and work that probably makes you happy and shows off your personality and stuff. But ultimately, once you have a job, it becomes a way more personal thing, right? Like at that point, you really can show off who are you, what do you like to do? Yeah. Because you suddenly have the weight of having to find income off of your chest. You might have less time generally, which is, I think, something that a lot of people deal with, right? But overall, you now have the capability of saying like, hey, I have experience and this is what I want to do, and do you have projects like that? Because once you have experience, it's way easier to get a job. In terms of when you're starting to get into the industry, I think it's a totally different ball game. In my opinion, and this is advice, that's like filtered through all the advice that I got when I was applying for work, I think it's always best to ensure that there's no weak work in your portfolio when you're a student. And I think you should try and limit it to maybe like 5 to 6 projects that are really good. And by projects, I mean pieces of work that show off a variety of skills, and which aren't just like one image. Like a singular keyframe, no matter how beautiful it is, isn't really a project. A project is where, you're taking, let's say with like that dog design that I did, right? It's not the most extensive project because I did it when I have a job. But like if I was doing that as a student, I would say like, let's do 20 different designs of the dog and bring those up to a client-worthy level. Let's then do 3 different, full designs in color, which take it up a bit more. Let's show off like my 3D modeling skills and do like a turntable of the 3D model. Let's do a final render of that thing. Let's do some black and white thumbnails to check out different value compositions that show that I can do this stuff. And then let's show the keyframe, right? It's about showing more than one skill, essentially. If you're only showing off one skill per project, then you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot, I think, a little bit, because ultimately most concept art jobs are multifaceted. You're very rarely, unless you're like, I don't know, maybe like John Park, you're probably not going to get hired to do just one thing on a production. Especially as a student, where you're probably going to get hired onto a game or some kind of production as a junior, and you'll be expected to fill in a lot of the gaps that other artists either just don't want to do or need someone to fill. So if you're doing a character project and you want to get hired as a character artist at a game studio, throw in some props into that project as well. If your character's holding a sword, let's see like some variations of the sword and some different stuff. And if they're holding a shield, the same thing. Because if you're working in an in-studio environment, the person who can do a variety of things is always going to be kind of preferable at a junior level than the person who can only do one thing. Because often as a junior, you probably can't even do that one thing that well. So, you need to like build up the experience over time. It's very different. I think it's really interesting, if you get to know any professional artists, that you can kind of filter through and look back at their old stuff and just see what they were making back then.
Yes.
Because it can be really informative as to their improvement and stuff like that. And I really credit a lot of people. I think it's a great thing if you are a professional to maybe actually leave some of your old work accessible, because it makes you more human. And it means that people can see that what you're doing is achievable, rather than just having like this, god tier work. This is me. Yes. I was always like this.
First try. There's no other attempts apart from this one.
Exactly.
And obviously, like, kind of expanding upon, I know you touched a lot of this stuff upon, because it kind of ties into portfolio as well. What do you think a modern day or current day concept artist, designer should be? Whether it's either like kind of personality traits or skill sets they should have? Obviously, things are changing, things will always change, but what are the kind of go-to things based on your experiences and the people that you've spoken to as well, that you keep seeing cropping up all the time, that are just constant, like, okay, these are the must-have skill sets, otherwise, there's no point?
I think so. Obviously, the industry has gone through like a pretty dramatic shift over the last like 5-6 years, where even 6 years ago 3D was used, but people were using it in a very like grey kind of like block out and then I sketch over it and do my painting kind of way, or they weren't like truly using 3D in the same way that people in the industry are using it now, where we're building like full textured models that often do like 80% of the legwork in an image for us. So I think like I said, like the industry has changed a lot, and I think as part of that, if you're going to get a job today, you probably need to learn 3D, and you probably need to be proficient in a few different programs and understand how to render properly and understand like standard work processes. At the same time, I think the really valuable stuff is still the same as it was 5-6 years ago, which is extremely strong fundamental skills. That could be fundamentals of just like design and knowing the right stuff on how to design something properly, but also, knowing perspective, traditional perspective, knowing anatomy, knowing how to paint and like choose colors and all this like quite technical stuff really. And I think that's becoming more and more and more important because, like I said earlier, with access to stuff like Sketchfab, making a pretty image is easier than ever. And often the people who differentiate themselves are the people who can add unique stuff to those pretty images, whether that, if they're doing a medieval knight, it's the interesting project is the person who models their own knight and puts in some really interesting design details into it, and is able to build that themselves. But not just build that themselves, but also potentially do iterations where they're sketching over it, which they can do over the 3D because they know perspective and they understand how forms and lines work and stuff like that. And even with the AI stuff, I feel like this stuff is just going to get more and more and more important. Those like inherent fundamentals. Personally, I'm not super worried about AI. It's not something that keeps me up at night. Maybe like a few months ago it did, but I've kind of gotten over it. I'm moving on with my life. But even if that stuff was to become, the be-all, end-all of the industry, it's fundamentals that will make a difference. It's fundamentals that will help push artists to the next level. And I think it's the most common mistake that I see students making is that they have portfolios where it's just all 3D and nothing else. And it's very beautiful 3D, but it doesn't tell me about their personality. It doesn't tell me what they like. It doesn't tell me how good are they at designing stuff. How good are they at like building their own assets? How good are they at doing this and that and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I think being able to fulfill certain like skill ceilings of fundamentals, which was important 6-7 years ago, is still super important, if not more important now, especially when 3D is just like easier and easier to use every year. Yeah. And
did you ever go through that kind of like, I guess, process yourself, where you maybe got like attached to a process or even 3D or a tool set versus what you're just mentioning now, like, really kind of just being at center of it all and being strategic? and making sure that you're answering the visual question or the problem that needs to be solved, or even just the goal at hand. Like, did you ever have those kind of like pitfalls, or like those kind of phases, I guess?
It's probably funny because I only got into the industry like 2 years ago, and it's crazy to see how much the student mentality has changed. But I think myself and most of the people I know suffered from the opposite problem that most students suffer from today. We were all like, there's no fucking way we're using 3D. That's the devil's technology. It wasn't until I saw people like actually using it and I understood what it was and all that stuff that I started using it. And yeah, it was like insanely helpful because it speeds up your process so much, and it adds a level of accuracy that can take 10 years to learn, to your lighting and to other stuff. So yeah, in terms of like stuff that I got stuck with, I just got stuck with trying to do everything in 2D. And then on top of that, there were, maybe you can relate to this, Aaron, but like that thing of when you're learning and you're like, I'm never going to use reference, which I don't know why people start doing that. But I went through that and I was like, I'm never going to look at a reference image. That's for the weak. So yeah, I just went through like the opposite problem. And once I started opening myself up to the different possibilities that were there, I think that's when I really allowed myself to improve. I think as well as realizing that there is a certain quality level that is very difficult to reach without 3D. I mean, that's obvious enough by just look at an art book from like 10 years ago, There's a really great one for Ratchet and Clank that came out, like, I want to say like a year or two ago, where it's kind of like a timeline of the concept art across the games. And they have stuff from like the 2000s to now. And I mean, it's just like night and day. The stuff from the 2000s is like ballpoint sketches on like lined note paper. And it doesn't it's like, it's the kind of quality which, like, if a professional saw it now, they'd be like, where are you, kindergarten, what the fuck are you doing? So yeah, I mean, like, the quality standard has massively gone up, and part of that is that there are certain techniques that people use now which up the quality standard, and unless you're going to spend a year painting it, by hand in micro detail, you're going to have to use those techniques. So, yeah.
And have you found that on the projects you've worked on, like, there's a certain process or certain, like, kind of steps you need to take, whether it's, like you mentioned, using 3D or a certain type of trait that you need? Maybe I'm sure obviously speed's always the biggest thing as well. But, like, are there certain things that you kind of like, the way the industry is, you're going to need X, Y, and Z because that's not going to change?
3D is not going to change. Sketching ability won't change. I think painting ability is super essential in my opinion, and just like general understanding of like value structure. No matter what you're doing, it's value structure and stuff like that. But I don't know. It's funny because like depending on the project, obviously you have to, especially in film in-house, you're essentially fulfilling like a generalist role. I've done creature designs at work, VFX concepts, set designs, landscapes, bits of architecture, like a very wide variety of stuff, and I have to hit a certain quality standard every time I do something like that. So I think I have a certain mindset to the way that I do things as a bit of a generalist, which is I kind of treat everything a bit the same. But I also just have different processes that I use for different things. If I'm doing even doing a creature, I might start the creature in Gravity Sketch and then bring it into ZBrush to remesh it, model it up, then texture in Blender. Or if it's a different type of creature, I'm going to just build it in Blender. Or if it's a other thing, it's going to be all in ZBrush or whatever, right? I think what's really important is experimenting with enough stuff that whenever you get a new project, you have an existing thought process on how to handle that. Something that I kind of attribute to that for me was like me and my friend Reese did a thing called the Keyframe Challenge for like, I don't know, like a year we ran it, where I think we put up like 30 different briefs for like keyframes, and they're all very, very different. But we don't do it anymore, but it was a nice thing while we were doing it. And because we were always choosing stuff which we hadn't done before, it was like, okay, today we're doing a dragon. And so then I learned how to make a dragon. And then another week we're doing like a rocky landscape, and I was like, okay, well now I know how to do a rocky landscape, and so on and so forth. Like I exposed myself to enough different stuff where anything that I did in the workplace became accessible because I had already hit something similar. I think that's also just like when you meet somebody with like an insane amount of experience, like if they've been in the industry for like 20 years, you can throw anything at those guys and they're just going to go, oh yeah, okay, cool. And they got it. And I think that's probably it, right? They just work on such a massive variety of stuff that they've done something before. I need like a specific type of magic power. All right, well, I did that 3 years ago on Fantastic Beasts. Mm-hmm. Oh, I need this type of architecture. I did that 20 years ago on, I don't know, Harry Potter. Whatever.
Definitely.
Was Harry Potter 20 years ago? Probably now,
Probably,
right?
yeah, probably 30, who knows, yeah. He's a magician, so, you know, probably even longer.
Yeah.
No, but that's definitely like a great way to sum it up. Like, you're building your own kind of recipe book with each project, and you're like, and it's cool because you seem, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you seem fearless when it comes to tackling things that you haven't done before. Whereas there's some artists that I've met, and there's definitely chapters in my career where I've kind of been like a bit timid about certain things, as opposed to when you eventually tackle thinking, why didn't I do this earlier? Or why didn't I go straight for that as well? Does that describe you well? Like, you just kind of this fearlessness?
I try to just expose myself to as much stuff as I can. There's definitely things where, you know, like there's certain techniques, like I'd love to use ZBrush in a similar way to like Pablo Dominguez uses it, because he's like so fast and he does like this insane like level of detail. But by the same time, like I'm not sure if that's the right set of techniques for me, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe I will try it one day when I have the time, but as of right now, I'm like, that's very cool, but maybe it's not the type of very cool that I want to do. So I don't just like throw myself at anything, but you know, even we were talking before the podcast about Plasticity, which is a cool like new program that's come out, and I decided to buy that and give that a go because I think it would, you know, I've never done a CAD thing before. So, and it's like, people have been telling me like, oh, Daniel, it's CAD, but it's for morons. And I'm like, that's me. So yeah, like I don't think I'm like fearless would be like a massive dramatization,
okay,
but
okay.
We can say that if you want. I'll put it on my CD, you know, fearless leader. But yeah, you know, it's just like trying new stuff because you'll enjoy it more than anything else. Yeah. When you're a student, maybe you have to be more of that kind of like fearless mentality of like doing stuff that, you know, genuinely might actually scare you to try because you're so ingrained in your ways. And often when you have a low level of experience, it's all the more scary to do stuff that you haven't done before. But now I just try and find things that I think will be fun. And I engage with them from that standpoint. Like, I've been using a lot of like VR over the last few years because VR is like so wildly different to any other form of modeling. And that's exposed me to some like super cool stuff. And I use VR on like nearly every personal project that I do. And I love it. It's great. So yeah, I think it's important to just keep trying stuff, but to also try stuff that you actually like, rather than, I don't know, forcing yourself to do things that you don't. Right?
I think that's, I mean, I don't know if you've been there, but I've definitely been there where this is more so during education, where like, because that was told this is the way, you kind of do it, and you know deep down like this doesn't feel right for me, or this is like going to be like, oh, I want to really, this is going to be annoying if I have to do this all the time, but you just do it because you're kind of told that, you know, this is the kind of formula you need to follow. But I think, and what you also kind of mentioned there as well, like the beauty of our industry is you can customize a formula as much as you want over and over again, reuse it. One of the coolest things about concept art, and you nailed it as well, like you can tackle 10 different projects in 10 different ways. VR equally the same, like it's just so free creating in VR, except the whole like, you know, wires and all that kind of shit. But in terms of when you're kind of plugged in, using both hands, not as in like, you know, holding a stylus, and just creating freely is it's definitely different. And again, like just to kind of recap as well, being strategic with it as well, like, you know, certain projects are going to work in certain ways, and then obviously you also know with your clients and your colleagues who's going to respond to what, and keep making note of all those kind of things as well. And then with that all kind of said, like, who are the people that you look up to, whether that's current peers or even, you know, just legends in general? Like, what are the kind of artists and art and maybe even creative processes that really float your boat?
I mean, all my friends and my colleagues at ILM, love you guys. I mean, yeah, I've just been really lucky to have met so many awesome people in my life. I think if we're just talking about like artists that I think are insane, like Stephen Tappan and Jason Hawley, who are two of the art directors at ILM London, are incredibly good. Like, they really opened my eyes to what being a high level artist actually means. And I've seen them do things where I'm just like, wow, holy shit, I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know you could make something that cool that quick, or whatever. The same token, like, same thing with James Klein. Like, working with him was incredibly eye-opening in a totally different way, because like the variety of skills that he demonstrated on the project we worked on together was like crazy, and I learned so much from him. And then just like artists I just generally really like, I think Matt Alsop is absolutely awesome. I don't know if you've seen his work, but he did like a lot of the storyboards and keyframing for Rogue One, and he did some amazing images for Obi-Wan Kenobi. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's I guess I lean towards ILM Lucasfilm artists, which is probably why I work there. But I don't know. It's too many people to name, right? It's I just try and find people who really inspire me and really do something that's different. I think, like, I always think Jamie Jones and Craig Mullins are like absolute god tier artists, because you can. It's funny that they kind of work in the same section of the industry, that like blue sky, beautiful promotional image kind of, but also concept-y thing. But both of them have such different styles as well. And, Craig Mullins is like incredibly expressive, and he uses all these like crazy wide lenses. And then you look at Jamie Jones and it's like incredibly tight painting with like the level of technicality is just unreal. So I just try and look at people who inspire me, and that does change on like a fairly regular basis. There's always those people who I'm like, oh, these people are amazing, but it's always cool to find new artists and engage with what they're doing and kind of stay inspired. I don't remember what the second part of the question was, sorry.
Neither do I. That's cool. No, I think that's also cool as well, like with art, with anything creative, and with anything where people put themselves out there, like, it's never gonna get boring. And equally, there's a lot of boring stuff out there, purely because we all follow maybe the same trends and we all play it safe. But the ones that really put themselves out there, they're really kind of like, well, they take a risk and they just do it. Like, that's always going to be there, because there's a type of person that will always do that. And maybe it's kind of like a inbuilt rebelliousness in a kind way, or channeled in the right way. But yeah, I'm always like excited to see that, and that's what I look forward to the most. I think, like, we've all kind of seen almost every technique that's possible, how that's done. I think, like, look at other industries and genres, like even film, obviously, that's that's a big chunk of the industry that a lot of artists want to aim for and work in as well. Look at music, even look at cooking. It's like the parameters are pretty much set, everything's kind of been done, almost to the point where, like, it's not the technique or the tools that will define what's awesome. But yeah, it's always someone finds an avenue, finds a little path that's never been trodden before, and just blows everyone's socks off.
I think it's all about, like, ultimately, I don't know if you remember, like, the first time you ever saw, like, a piece of art that really blew your mind, but it's like that kind of like childlike joy that you feel, right? That when you were younger, you would see a piece of work by, I don't know, like, that, I don't know, some concept artist, John Park, Vinnie McManus, and I remember being a teenager and looking at that stuff and just being like, wow, I'd never seen anything like that before. And I think ultimately that's what we're all kind of like hunting for, as artists, is not only bringing that feeling to other people, but creating work that replicates that feeling within ourselves, and seeing work that replicates it within ourselves. All of my favorite artists that I look at on a regular basis, when I look at it, it brings that kind of like childlike joy out of me. I've always been a really big fan of Jean-Leon Gérôme, who's kind of like a French classical painter. It's truly like beautiful work. I highly recommend it. It's like concept art before concept art. It's really, really awesome and amazing stuff. And I went to Paris like a few months back,
Cool.
and I was in d'Orsay, which is one of the big museums there. And I was walking through, and suddenly, like on my left, was one of his paintings, and it's my favorite painting that he ever did. And seeing that painting in person was like a genuinely like magical moment for me. You know, I wasn't expecting it. I didn't know it was there. And I just like stood and stared at it for like 10 minutes. It was so beautiful and well done. And if you're talking about like bringing back that like sense of wonder, you know, that you feel as like a young kid, that really brought me back there. I could go back there right now and sit there for a
Same.
few hours. But yeah, it is a really wonderful experience when you see something like that. And I think it's really important as an artist to hold on to that feeling, and, you know, to try and look through at things with that sense of wonder and enjoyment. Even, you know, I think it's a great thing, let's say that you're a professional who's looking at a student's work. I think it's really wonderful if you can find those elements even within that student's work. That, you know, maybe it's not the most technically beautiful thing in the world, but like trying to find stuff that makes you excited in it so that they can feel excited about their work as well, and bringing that stuff into your own work, so that, again, like you can translate that sense of passion to other people. So I think that really does translate through the screen often.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's ultimately, I guess, the aim of the game, or the name of the game. It's like, yes, we're solving problems. Yes, we're trying to solve these mini tasks as part of a bigger project. But ultimately, when it's a film, whether it's a happy film, sad film, or whatever, it's there meant to elicit that emotion, or elicit something, or really like trigger you in a positive way or a sad way, or just last thing you want is just for someone to be like staring at it and just move on to the next thing.
Yeah,
totally. You know, like you mentioned that you stared at that painting for 10 minutes, but it's been with you for a big chunk of your life up to that point, and you even appreciate it to another level afterwards. And yeah, man, it's like almost like this weird energy that we're tapping into, and it's addictive. No?
Yeah, totally. It's the building of a relationship between the author and the viewer, right?
For sure.
And I think it's really, it's a really rare but an incredible thing when, especially like, you know, film is one thing, but when somebody can create a single image, you know, which doesn't move, which has no other context to it, but can elicit such a strong emotion in you, that's like a phenomenally amazing thing.
Yes, for sure. And in terms of like building a relationship, it's been very clear since I first met you and through the stuff we do with Concept 101 and listening to you today, friendships and community and being around other people, artists I'm sure as well, and non-artists too, that's something that's either important for you, either intentionally, or it's just something that you gravitate towards. So yeah, I'd love to hear more about that aspect for you. Like, is that something you dwell upon too much, or is this something that kind of like just happens and you're surrounded by these amazing like-minded people that influence you, help you, and I'm sure guide you as well? I
think when I was younger, there was probably a part of me which was, you know, very shy, and I had to like force myself out of that bubble. I don't think many people who meet me now would say that I'm a shy person.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Yeah. But I think that part of it for me is, you know, like I said, I'm not a self-made man. And I think it's very important to both acknowledge that, but to also return that favor to other people. Like, that's always been the mindset behind Concept 101 for me, Jules, and Stefan. It's like, we all got so much help, you know, from these events, and so it's important to us, because we have the capability to do it, to bring that help and that kind of like aid, I guess, to other people, and to continue the kind of like cycle. And so I think in a similar way, like, a lot of artists helped pull me out of my shell, and they helped mentor me, and they gave me advice, and so it's always just been something that I've wanted to do since that point. Like, I think I want to attribute this to Kevin, who was probably the most patient of all of my mentors, because he dealt with me from like kind of, I don't know, when I was like 20, which is probably when I was like at the lowest point of my like concept art journey. And I remember like sometime we were talking about it, and I think I'd got like my first freelance job offer or something, and I sent him a message, and I was like, I could not have done this without you. And I was like, there's no level of like thanks I could ever give you which would truly encapsulate like, how much I owe you. And he said, like, just make sure that you carry that on to other people and that you give other people help. And so I think that's like the singular most important thing if you're part of the industry, is to be a person who tries your best to embody that. Obviously, don't like, kill yourself to do it. Like, you have to maintain your own mental health and you can't give all of your time to other people. But if you have time to give, I think it's very important to try your best to do it, because that's how you continue a community. And that's also how you build a community, right? Like, a community doesn't exist just based on you being a really cool artist that everybody loves. A community is built around you being an artist who's generous with your time, who responds to students, who maybe goes and gives lectures, who does this and that, right? Like, that's what starts a community. And I think the more you do it, the more kind of like entrenched you get into it. I just can't really imagine not having to respond to a student once a week now. I mean, like, cool job, you're doing great, keep going. And giving them a bit of advice. And I think it is genuinely an important thing, because a lot of people, or not a lot of people, but some people come into the industry. And I remember when I was coming up in the industry, I would meet people at events and stuff who would say things to me like, I'm not going to play the game, I'm not going to network, I'm just going to be so good that they have to hire me. Right. And it's like, having been in the industry, I can tell you that those people do not exist. There is nobody so good or so cool that it negates you being an arsehole. It doesn't matter how amazing you are at painting. You could be Jamie Jones, but if you're not nice to work with, no one's going to work with you. So I think even just from a professional capacity, it's important to try your best to be a kind of like kind and understanding person. And you can bet your ass that when you're working with like clients, you better be kind and understanding, right? Because you can't go up to a client and go like, that's a fucking terrible idea, I'm not doing that. And it's like, well, you won't have your job for very long then. Community building, I hope it's an important thing for everybody, really. Because that's what, that's like the human experience, right? And that's what makes something like the concept art community special, is that there is a community, and it's something that has to be fostered and looked after in different bubbles. And if you have a bunch of friends who get together and you meet regularly, you've built a community, and that's a really wonderful and genuinely great thing, I think.
No, totally well put. And it's also how interesting, like, sometimes things that seem opposites, it's tracks as the laws of the universe, but like artists tend to be introverted, isolated. Technically, when you work, you have to be isolated to actually put that time in, unless you're Dr. Manhattan or somebody. But then again, like, when it comes to these events, I don't know about you, but for me, like, my default position is any public kind of gathering with more than 2 people is like, I'll stay away unless I have to go there. Things like my first industry event was industry workshops. I went Concept 101 last year as well. There's just something profound about being around people who are similar to you in terms of the journey, but equally very different because they're on their own journeys, they're individuals as well. And it's hard to explain unless you've kind of been there. And when you guys are doing Concept 101, at least from your perspective, because seeing some of the behind the scenes stuff that you guys do and what you have to go through, it's not something that you can just like order something off Amazon and just set it up and just click and it's kind of done, or like an Uber. There's a lot of work that goes into it that takes away from other stuff that you're doing that are equally is passionate and that maybe is more better serving to yourself and your own career path than setting up an event. So, like, first of all, how do you kind of do that? Why do you do that? I know you kind of mentioned that a little bit and answered that a little bit as well, but like, what really motivates you to want to put that effort in and give so much of your energies to do something like Concept 101?
I don't know, really. I just feel like I owe it to people, maybe, to an extent. I mean, by the same token, there is the reality that Concept 101 will not go on forever, right? Like, it probably will have a point where all of the organizers have to decide, like, okay, well, there are other things to look after myself that I have to do, because it is incredibly time consuming. So yeah, it's probably not going to be this eternal thing that, eclipses the millennium. But right now, I feel like it's still, although it is a lot of work, especially with like, having a life and just doing other stuff. still people are benefiting from it, and I think that's it just is good. And I kind of hope that other events. I've actually seen, I think there's like 2 new events that cropped us up this year in Europe.
Sick.
I think Mood Visuals set up one. Ooh. And someone else set up one, but I can't remember who it is. But then equally you have like other great events like Non-Stop in Barcelona, which I'm planning to go to this year. So see me there. But yeah, it's really cool to be able to do this stuff and to, I guess, like help the community in that way. But yeah, I don't know. Like I said, it literally cannot happen forever. But for the time that it's happening, it's great to be able to do it. And I don't think it's something that, any of us regret giving up that time to do something like this for other people. Yeah, it's cool. And also it's not like we get no benefits from it. We get to meet really cool people. We get to chat to amazing speakers. We get to communicate with lots of like leadership people in leadership positions. And I get to stand on stage and shout at people. That's all I really want in life. Just stand on stage permanently.
So aside from like those key benefits, what kind of like, I guess, what is your favorite story or takeaway? Maybe even like someone's own testimonial from the event that you've heard after doing it that really kind of like made it worth your while, or really kind of like that. Okay, that's the thing I'm going to pin on the notice board to say this kind of achieved what we wanted to achieve, or maybe even surprised you in terms of like what people got from it.
I don't know. I mean, I was happy that people liked it. That was definitely that was like the main anxiety. It was like, people are going to hate this. But yeah, it's people really liked it. And we had a really amazing response this year as well. Like we sold out all of our tickets in under a week, which was pretty crazy. And we sold out about like 500 of them in a day, which was pretty insane.
Because last year was 500, right?
Last year was 400 people. So we sold out. People. We sold more tickets in one day than we sold for the whole event last year, essentially, which was pretty.
And this year, how many have you sold?
I don't know if I can say.
Okay.
I'd have to consult. It's more than last year.
At least 401, right? Okay, cool.
Yes,
cool.
Don't know.
Got it.
I'll consult with Jules and Stefan if I can tell you later.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. It's pretty. It was just like, it was really all of the fun stuff happened at the after party for us, I think, for the organizers, because for the whole event we were like running around just being like, hopefully for people who were there it was like a very seamless experience, but obviously there's always stuff going on behind the scenes. Someone loses their bag, someone does this, someone does that, and you have to be there and just sprint between stuff. So we don't really get to experience a lot of the talks, but yeah, just going to the after party and chatting to people, and a lot of people were very generous and kind of spoke to me and came and said thank you and stuff like that. So that was really lovely to see. And I mean, some people got hired, which was really cool to hear. Some people got jobs from the event.
We've got a couple of instructors from last year's event as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I tell you, I have to confer with the team if I can reveal that. But yeah, so we definitely got some benefits from that too.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, in that regard, it's super cool to know that like people are getting the same things out of it that I got out of events in the past. So yeah, that's the main thing. I'm sure I could pull up like nice text messages that people sent. Right. Overall, it's just the seeing a lot of people with smiles on their faces is pretty great. So
sick. Now, we've spoken a lot about things that we like and we're inspired by the industry, especially yourself. What are the things that you despise or don't like, except AI?
Even with AI, I can see that there are potential uses. I'm not a big fan of it because, obviously all of the general issues with like it stealing people's work essentially and like being built up of the sweat of other people, right? But it's not to say that there aren't potential uses for it in the future if those issues get fixed. I think it's like deeply anti-human, the way that it like just generates images. It's like glorified Google search to me. So yeah, I'm not a massive fan of it. But yeah, I don't know, like stuff that I dislike. I don't like I said earlier, I really dislike the trend of just everything being built out of Sketchfab assets. It really bothers me, and it's something I see in a lot of student portfolios these days. and I really hope that's a trend that starts to turn around as those kind of portfolios. But it's one of those things where, like, as that type of portfolio becomes more saturated, it becomes less unique, and so then the trend shifts to another type of portfolio. So I hope that starts to happen soon, because I don't think students are getting the most out of their learning experience by making work like that, necessarily. Not to say there's no place for it in their portfolio, but just generally speaking. I don't know, things I dislike. That's a difficult one, Aaron.
Like even annoyances, pet peeves, like, maybe render times, maybe it's certain people you want to name drop. It's up to you, man.
Yeah.
It's good they have to think about it.
I think the overall, there's things that I wish were there were more of in the industry.
That's I guess a better question. Yeah, what would you like to see more of, or that's a better question.
I think one thing that I wish more people spoke about is, the fact that concept art is a fairly expensive thing to get into, right? Like, to really get into it at a high level, you need like a decent computer, you need to have access to certain programs, you need to buy things or pirate stuff, whatever floats your boat. You need to buy a whacking board, you need to be doing this and that. And I really hope that I'm super encouraged by the fact that Blender has become the main thing, because again, it's one of those things I think decreases the ceiling for access, right? It means that you don't have to spend £200 on a Maya license or whatever to start learning 3D models. So I think that's really amazing, and I hope that more accessible means of getting into kind of digital art start to come around. I don't know how that's going to happen, but maybe it's just even on the level of younger people, at secondary schools and stuff like that, actually starting to be educated in how to use that stuff and having technology more apparently available to them. And I think, just stuff like that. To me, it's I think concept art is a really wonderful career, and obviously it's very niche, but I think it's great. There are always, no matter how competitive the industry feels, there's always studios that are looking for work. For workers. There probably are also ones looking for work, but that's not what we're talking about. So I just hope that like more and more people are able to get into it, and the industry expands in such a way. I feel like a lot of the reasons that studios might want to adopt AI is to do with the fact that they want to decrease their workforces. But like, in my personal opinion, it would be great to just expand them so that more people get to put their ideas in, so you get a greater diversity of thought coming into projects, and so when you have more diverse set of opinions from people, you get much more interesting stuff, rather than it just being like one tiny group of people's opinions on like how this needs to look, how this thing should be handled, etc., etc. So yeah, to be fair, I think the industry is overall in a pretty decent place. I can only speak from my experience, but I've always found it to be a very accepting and like friendly place. I just hope that other people get to experience that as well, and just being nice to each other and vibing out.
And because we get a lot of and as yourself, you deal with a lot of students, people are just starting out, people who, and we've been there where it's kind of like a lot of doubt, a lot of second guessing, a lot of not knowing what's beyond, the fuck that's right in front of you. What would you say to them who are maybe worried about what things like AI, maybe how they'll impact the industry? Like yourself will say that the industry's great. Others will say that it's about to collapse almost immediately. And there's obviously everything's in between, and we all feel maybe for the same things. But what would you say to those people? Like, what should they maybe hone in on, just to make sure that at least whatever happens, they'll still be in a good position to take the opportunities when they come up?
I think I have a bit of a I've got like kind of a bit of a fatalist opinion, but maybe it's not fatalist, is not the right word, but the way that I see it is like this. You can spend your whole life prepping for, for example, whatever the disaster of the week is. The AI apocalypse is the disaster of this year, right? You can spend your whole student life being like, I'm going to learn to use AI. I don't like it, but I'm going to learn how to use it. And I'm going to learn like this specific work process because this is like the process of the future and blah, blah, blah. But in the worst case scenario where all of this stuff takes over, you're screwed no matter what, right? No matter where you are in the industry, no matter who you are, you can't prepare for like a truly cataclysmic like event. So the way that I see it is just don't let it get to you. Enjoy your life as much as you can. Do things that make you happy and prepare for what you can prepare for. But in terms of like people preparing for AI, I mean, I spent a fair amount of time on like Singularity forums and stuff like that, and looking at like the latest advancements and stuff, and it's super interesting. But if it gets to that like cataclysmic world event stuff, it doesn't matter if you learn to use 3D or not, or if you've built up your portfolio with the right amount of vehicle concepts versus character concepts. It's there already, right? So I think people just need to kind of remember that nothing's set in stone. It's like, I wrote an article ages ago, which was kind of like arguments against AI, but it was more just like, it was more of trying to position opinions on it and like give a slightly different take on what was mainly in the media at the time. And one of the things that I always heard over and over again was like, this is the this is the wheel of progress. It crushes you underfoot, but it cannot be stopped. And that just isn't true. Some things, some technology succeeds, some technology doesn't. Some things as a global society we decide are anti-human, that they shouldn't be things that we should use. Like cloning technology exists. I don't see many clones walking among us these days. And it's a fairly extreme example, but it fulfills the point of what I'm trying to say, right? Nothing's inevitable. So if you've worked yourself up into like this kind of fit of fear and rage, essentially, about Rage Against the Machine, that's a good band. But yeah, if you've worked yourself up into that, you need to just take a step back and realize that you're not seeing into the future. No one's seeing into the future, and nobody really knows what's going to be happening 10 years down the line. So prepare for things as they come, rather than, trying to be like the last artist left alive on Earth. Just enjoy things. If you want to do concept art, then do concept art. If you think that you're preparing for the worst case scenario by being a plumber, well, then in the worst case scenario, there's going to be robots doing the plumbing at that point anyway. So what, you get like an extra year of life doing something you don't like? Just do the thing you like. It is a funny thing, and I totally understand why people are scared, and I was scared too for a while, but I just think you have to get on with your life and enjoy it as much as you can. And you know what? If we're the last generation of concept artists, then I'm going to have fun being the last generation of concept artists.
And I guess, like, speaking of new avenues and new beginnings, you made a career change? No, not career change. You started a new place, yeah. So how's that been? Has that begun yet? Or what prompted the change?
Well, it hasn't really begun yet, or
Okay.
I won't speak about that too much. But in terms of what prompted the change, it's probably a shitty answer, but I just wanted a change. I had a really wonderful time at ILM, and like I said, like I hope that the people that I worked with still want to hang out with me moving forward, even though I betrayed them. But yeah, I learned so much, and after a while, it's just a great opportunity to be uncomfortable again and go and learn new stuff. I think that's one of the things that helped kind of drive at least like my early career forward, was I always made sure that I wasn't getting too comfortable with stuff. If I was doing like a project with a cowboy piece, right, and suddenly I felt like I can really nail a cowboy piece, then that was probably the last cowboy piece I did for a while, because I don't need to practice doing stuff that I think I can nail, right? So I think it's just important to stay uncomfortable, and that was a lot of the kind of decision to make a studio change was, they have different in-house styles, they have different artists who work for them, they have different projects, and as a like fairly young artist early on in my career, while I have the time and the ability to move between places, I think it's a really amazing opportunity, since it arose for me, to essentially just go and try something new and see how it goes. And of course, it's an amazing team of people there as well. So I'm just super excited to see essentially what I can learn from them, and how I can like synthesize it into my own learning to make me the ultimate artist.
Yes.
You know,
The one that conquers AI.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The one that AI can't even train off. It's defeated us.
Yeah.
And I guess like final point before we wrap up. What other things apart from the billion things you got going on right now are you maybe got in the pipeline? Maybe like any personal projects or other ventures you want to explore that are also like I guess on the horizon that are really exciting you?
Like I said earlier, some of the films that are coming out, I'm super excited about. I'm incredibly excited to see The Creator. It was just like working on that was like the highlight of my time at ILM. It was super, super cool. And I think everybody that I work with was pretty sick of me talking about it after a while. So yeah. Other than that, I don't know. Like I'm trying to kind of do more mentoring in a more kind of like, I guess like professional capacity, I suppose, and like making that more of a thing. I've always found it's really rewarding, you know, and it's very enjoyable. So I'm trying to just do more of that and potentially maybe seeing if I can move that into maybe some, I don't know, like Gumroads or stuff. Maybe if I think of something that I'm like, yeah, I can teach that in a tight, 20-minute Gumroad. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, besides that, it's just the event takes up so much of my time. I'm super excited to see you at this year's event and to hang out again. I'm super excited to see all of the speakers who are coming. I'm super excited to just hopefully have a good time. Maybe this year, we'll see. We'll see how many things like set on fire in the background. But yeah, I'm just incredibly excited for that to happen and for people to have fun and enjoy it, hopefully. So yeah, in terms of immediate stuff, that's all. Next year when I return as the 3-time returning champ, I'll have more stuff to tell you.
Sick. Fair enough. And any final thoughts, words from yourself, and anything you'd like to plug before we wrap up?
Final thoughts is hard. I don't know, man. Come to my event. What about that?
Perfect.
I don't know. Just remember that. I've got to say something profound. You should have told me. I could have prepped something really profound and found like a poetry quote or something beforehand. Be happy.
So profound as you can get.
Yeah. I will say there's. If you like listen to the one-on-one podcast, which me, Jules, and Stefan do together, or even if you listen to this, there's often a lot of talk, even like from what me and Aaron has said today, about like, having like work ethic and like how many projects can you make per year and how do you do all of this stuff together, and how do you get all these things done and not like lose your mind. And I do just want to say, like, if that is the kind of lifestyle that vibes with you, then that's great, because it vibes with me and that's how I kind of like live, and it's what makes me happy, even if it makes me insane sometimes as well. But that's like the kind of person that I am. And if you're a student out there who listens to that and goes, holy shit, I cannot imagine doing that, that's totally fine. I remember hearing Feng Zhu say something like, if you're working 8 hours a day and another student is working 16, over a year, they've learned double the amount that you have. So if you learn 20 hours a day, then you've learned triple the amount. And this like mentality of like always having to do more. And like it's important to just remember to take breaks, to manage your own expectations, and to push yourself as hard as you can, but not to breaking point. To manage your burnout and to maintain a feasible and happy lifestyle. Because without that, you can't make art, and you can't make art that you like, and you won't enjoy any of the process, and then you will truly burn out. So yeah, just don't take what I'm saying too seriously. That's what I'm trying to say.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Daniel, thanks so much for jumping on. Always a pleasure to chat with you, and it was a great talk.
Thank you, Aaron. Lovely to be here.
A big thanks to Daniel for sharing his journey and giving us many takeaways. Be sure to hit the links to see what he's up to and give him a follow. Then head on over to lenssquared.com and enrich your own art journey today. First lessons are free. I've been your host, Aaron Danda. Till next time.